Stop trying to convince people who benefit from your doubt. There comes a point in many people's lives when they realize they are exhausted, not because they're carrying too much, but because they are explaining too much, defending too much, justifying too much, convincing too much. For years, I thought if I could just explain myself clearly enough, people would understand. If I provided enough context, enough evidence, enough reasoning, eventually everyone would see where I was coming from. But life taught me something different. Not everyone wants understanding. Some people prefer your uncertainty. Some people prefer your hesitation. Some people prefer the version of you that doubts yourself. And the moment I understood that, everything changed. Because you cannot convince someone to support your confidence if they benefit from your doubt. Some people prefer the version of you that questions themselves, the version of you that second guesses every decision, the version that asks for permission, the version that constantly seeks reassurance, the version that needs validation before taking action. That version is predictable, manageable, influenceable. And while healthy people want to see you grow beyond that version of yourself, not everyone does. Some people become uncomfortable when you begin trusting your own judgment. And not because your judgment is wrong, because your self-trust changes the relationship. Your confidence changes the power dynamic. This is one of the most overlooked truths about personal growth. When you begin trusting yourself, the dynamic changes. You stop asking for approval. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop looking to other people to tell you who you are. And suddenly, people who were accustomed to having influence over your decisions find themselves with less control. Some relationships adapt beautifully. Others struggle. Not because confidence is a problem, because confidence changes the balance, and not everyone welcomes that change. Not every question is asked in good faith. At first, this can be difficult to recognize. Questions sound innocent. Why are you doing that? Are you sure? Have you thought this through? Do you really think that's a good idea? Sometimes those questions come from care. Sometimes they come from concern. But sometimes they come from something else. Sometimes they are designed to plant doubt, not to help you think, to make you question yourself. The difference often reveals itself in what happens after you answer. A person seeking understanding listens. A person invested in your uncertainty keeps moving the goalposts. No answer is enough. No explanation is sufficient. No amount of clarity changes the conversation because the goal was never clarity. Self-doubt makes you easier to control. When you doubt yourself, you are more likely to seek external validation. You ask other people what they think. You wait for approval. You hesitate before taking action. You defer to louder voices. And while that may seem harmless, it creates a dangerous habit. You begin trusting other people's opinions more than your own experience, more than your own instincts, more than your own wisdom. Over time, that disconnect can become profound because every time you ignore yourself, you weaken your relationship with yourself. The people who love you want you to trust yourself. Healthy people do not need your insecurity. They do not require your uncertainty. They do not benefit from your self-doubt. In fact, they usually encourage the opposite. They want to see you become more confident, more capable, more self-aware, more independent. The people who genuinely care about you understand that your growth is not a threat. It is something to celebrate. That distinction matters because it helps you recognize who is supporting your evolution and who is resisting it. You do not need to win the argument. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they can explain their way into acceptance. If I just say it differently, if I just provide more information, if I just make them understand. But some people already understand. They simply disagree. Or worse, they prefer the version of you that lacked confidence. No amount of explanation changes that. And once you realize this, something liberating happens. You stop performing. You stop defending. You stop exhausting yourself trying to gain approval from people who have already decided how they feel. Stop handing your power to the jury. Many people live as though their life is on trial. Every decision gets presented to an invisible jury. Friends, family, coworkers, former partners, strangers online. Everyone gets a vote. Everyone gets an opinion. Everyone gets a chance to weigh in. Everyone except the person actually living the life. The truth is that most of the people will not live with the consequences of your decisions. You will, which means their approval should never carry more weight than your own judgment. Self-trust is built one decision at a time. Confidence is not something you magically wake up with. It is built decision by decision, boundary by boundary, truth by truth. Every time you listen to yourself, every time you honor your values, every time you act in alignment with what you know is right for you, you strengthen trust. And the stronger that trust becomes, the less dependent you are on outside validation. That is where real confidence comes from, not from convincing others, from believing yourself. Freedom begins when you stop seeking permission. There is a unique kind of freedom that arrives when you stop needing everyone to agree, when you stop asking people to validate your choices, when you stop seeking approval from people who have no intention of giving it. You realize that their acceptance was never the goal. The goal was self-trust. The goal was living authentically. The goal was becoming the person you were meant to be. And the people who genuinely support you will never require you to doubt yourself to make them comfortable. Stop trying to convince people who benefit from your doubt. Stop handing your confidence to people who have not earned that authority. Stop asking for permission to trust yourself, because the moment you start believing your own wisdom, your life changes, and self-trust is where freedom begins. Slay reflection. S. See the pattern. Who in your life seems most uncomfortable when you trust yourself? L. Look at the dynamic. How does your confidence change the relationship? A. Acknowledge your authority. What decision have you been seeking validation for that you already know is right for you? Why? Your next step. What is one area of your life where you can choose self-trust over outside approval this week? Call to action. Join the conversation. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever realized that someone was more comfortable with your self-doubt than your confidence? Share your story in the comments. Let's cheer each other on. And if you know someone who might need this reminder, send this to them. Sometimes all we need is a nudge. I'm Carrie Genzel, reading a blog from stateofslay.com. Slay on.